Hey there guys, it's Metro, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Underrot dungeon on normal difficulty on the Battle for Azeroth Alpha. New build came out on Thursday night, that's April 19th, and we got two new dungeons. First one we're going to take a look at is Underrot. We'll also be taking a look at another one shortly thereafter, so stay tuned for that video. But first things first, you're going to see in this dungeon is, the theme of it is very fitting with the end of Nazma, something that I assume will continue into the first raid, which I believe is called Uldir. We did a little raid testing on that previous weekend there, but anyway, map does not work in this dungeon, unfortunately. As you see, I'm trying to look at the map there, but it's not working. Now, right out of the gate, you're going to see a very interesting mob type, and I do believe this is just a bug, what we're exhibiting here, but make a pretty foolish mistake, given the fact that this mob is doing what it's doing. These big, like, female mobs with the giant pokers for arms and kind of like a, I don't even know what it is. It's like a big circle for a helmet, like surrounding their head. I don't know what that is, but anyway, they're going to cast an ability there. You see it, they have 3 stacks of it that increases their haste by 100%, and I can only assume that this increases everything in that area's haste by 100%. Now, it's a bit odd because it doesn't, I don't know why it would be bugged, but it does do an insurmountable amount of damage, almost to the point that pretty much can't survive. So you see, even now it still has 3 stacks, and yeah, luckily it runs away, because otherwise I think I was about to die there. But I don't realize it at this point. I'm doing the dungeon. I'm not actually sure why I'm taking damage, but I see now even there it has 1 stack. Also does this kind of like, it charges and then does like a forward slash. So I don't know, this trash seems overly difficult. Really, one way or the other, the numbers aside, this is pretty dangerous trash for early on in the dungeon. This place really reminds me of Maw of Souls. I have to say that. It really does remind me of Maw, because it's quite short, and the layout is very, it's definitely not as short as Maw, but it's quite a linear layout. But there's a couple different ways you can go, and the trash in here can be, it feels like it can be really dangerous. And there's a lot of things that I think are going to slow you up. And then, you know, the second dungeon that we're going to take a look at too, it's quite similar. So thanks for the follow, whoever that was. I don't know how to actually turn that off, but anyway, yeah, so these you know, I think I'm looking at it now, just a wall of melees. Obviously that's not, you're not going to survive it when it's like that. So we're going to take a little bit to figure this out, but essentially what I'm trying to do, what we eventually end up trying to do here, is just separate one and kind of quickly nuke it down. But it gets a little chippy here in the dungeon because people aren't seeming to understand what the problem is. But yeah, we're figuring it out. These 2 mobs, like I said, the matrons or whatever, they're summoning a or not they're summoning, but they're like using like a rallying cry or a battle cry type ability, giving presumably every mob in the area a large amount of haste. And yeah, the group and myself really aren't recognizing it. And there's also this big mask that seems to be channeling on people. It's not really hurting us. People are claiming eventually, or maybe even it's happened by now, but people are getting upset thinking it's that. But yeah, realistically, it's this mob that's absolutely decimating us. And I don't know, I mean, as you can see, it's attacking faster than than you should expect mobs to attack. It's swinging so fast you can't even see the animations half the time. So yeah, I don't know. That's definitely not intended. But yeah, I don't think this part is supposed to be this hard. So I don't know. So we'll just cut that part out, because it takes like a half hour to beat that trash. But anyway, we eventually come to the first boss, and it's a pretty cool boss. I quite like this encounter. I think it's got some pretty unique mechanics. We'll show them off. There's really only one. The one part I have to emphasize here is that I don't know if they've buffed or nerfed normal or buffed us. I'm not really sure what to say, but these dungeons are ridiculously easy. If you've been watching the stream and following the channel, you'll see that it's just ridiculous easy, some of these. But this is a pretty interesting mechanic here, and it poses to be relatively difficult. So there's 3 puddles. You need somebody to stand in them to summon the ad, and then it's kind of like the Medivh, the arcane phase on Medivh. All 3 mechanics, or all 3 like ads, are going to be doing a certain type of mechanic. Interruptible. Also, this channel, it's kind of like fell sludge shooting out from them. They're doing it quite frequently, so it would greatly behoove us to all target one and nuke it down very quick. We do not do this because it's complete pug. First time anybody's ever done this dungeon in this group, so yeah, obviously that's that. So it's a pretty cool mechanic, and I think on Mythic, you know, Mythic Plus, etc., you're really gonna want to focus one down. Kind of reminds me, like I said, of Medivh, but way more difficult, way more dangerous. Certainly, actually does real damage, and that's only on normal. So actually get 2 upgrades from this dungeon, pretty cool. Finally getting higher item level gear now in the Blood DK. 310 gear, I believe is what it is, at 120, which is neat. I'm really liking the alpha. I'm really liking the Blood Death Knight changes. They did get some small changes. Finally, Red Thirst works, so that's a big deal. But yeah, realistically, the dungeon itself isn't going to showcase that much. We don't get in a lot of trouble, and even these big AoE packs, I basically just shred them. That's to the point now. The logs, by the way, in the description. It's going to be the log for both the 2 dungeons that I did in one sitting. We're doing this one first because I felt like this one was a little bit more. This one was the one I wanted to get it out first, and you'll see why. You'll see why in the second dungeon. But anyway, this one is, yeah, there's not really a lot going on. There's a lot of small pieces of trash. At this point in the dungeon, there's a lot of stuff that you can pull by accident, and it's only going to get worse from here. And that's another reason why I don't know, it's not really like Ma in that regard, but there's some things in Legion dungeons where there's a lot of trash that if you accidentally pull, you're going to really run into problems. And we've really been seeing that a lot in this expansion so far, BFA that is, and I don't know what to think about that. Like this room here especially. This room had me really geeked out. I didn't know what was happening here. I didn't know if we were meant to pull it all, or first of all, it took me a little bit to identify that mob in the middle of the room was a boss. If it wasn't for the stuff on the right, I probably wouldn't have recognized that was even a boss, because the name was like hovering over the mob there for a second, so it was like on there twice. Now it looks like to the right there's a pathway, but since the map doesn't work, I couldn't tell, so I'm a bit confused. I'm like, do we have to pull all this, or do we have to pull this whole room, or what? And eventually somebody pulls something else, and I'm like, alright, forget this. We're just gonna go right for the boss. And it works out. You don't have to. It doesn't look like you have to pull anything other than the boss if you were able to do so. But of course, you're not going to be able to do that. Now the boss does some interesting mechanics that perhaps on Mythic Plus will take up more of the room. But yeah, realistically, the normal version is not going to challenge us. And I'm kind of disappointed by that. That's probably one of the main things I would want to say on currently on the alpha. It's just like, I don't know. I wish they would allow us to do like a full progression gambit, because right now we're not really learning much from these dungeons. I don't know what they're learning from them. We're destroying them in such a way that the gear we have is frankly irrelevant. I'm not sure what they're gaining from us testing these dungeons at this point, because basically we could solo everything. I mean, obviously these dungeons, these 2 especially that we've done tonight, they're a lot more complicated than say the Mother Load. Even though the Mother Load looks like it's going to be very difficult on Mythic Plus, on normal, I was easily able to solo without really any trepidation whatsoever. And I think for most part, most of these elements of these dungeons would be the same. So anyway, this dungeon, this boss here in this dungeon, that is, he's going to shoot out some little green globs on the ground, and never really going to figure out why they're on the ground. But it does eventually break into mobs that we need to AoE down. And I don't know if he causes them to break, which, like I said, it really is a product of the fact that this is so easy. I never really learned these bosses. I never had to, but a bunch of them break, and I don't know exactly what caused it. But regardless, that's all I pretty much learned about the encounter. There's mobs that do some kind of bleed on me, and they have 0 health, so I just AoE them all together. If I had grip up, which I don't, I could have AoE gripped them all together and looked like a pro, but I wasn't able to do that because we used it on the previous trash pack. But anyway, it's a interesting looking encounter, I guess. He's got some globs on his body there, and he's charging around. So yeah, the charge is a bit worrisome. Got a bit lucky there. If I realized where we were and he charged directly out behind us, we would have probably reset him, which actually happens on the next boss. But yeah, I don't know. At this point, I'm trying to figure out where to go. I will say that the dungeon looks absolutely gorgeous, though, man. You don't get a good look at it because I'm using the inky black potion, but the whole place kind of looks like it's covered in snow for most of it. Like, if you don't use the inky black potion, there's basically this thick fog that's kind of like present around the entire dungeon, and I don't know necessarily why it looks like that. I mean, this isn't what I don't know, like the Nazma areas don't look like this, but it's kind of like around this big pyramid in the center of Nazma that it starts beginning to look like this if you go down deep. And that's actually where this dungeon is. It's underneath the kind of like the central area of Nazma that where the focal point of the story kind of concludes. And it takes you down to this dungeon here, which kind of looks like at the end of it takes you down into the raid, which immediately, it's quite funny because my first thoughts in these dungeons, there's actually 2 BRD, like pretty strong BRD thoughts that come to mind here. And then this one, it's the fact that we get to the end of the dungeon and it looks like we're in the raid. So I was thinking like, oh man, how cool would it be if after the dungeon there was a portal for the raid? And of course, you know, the game doesn't facilitate that type of thing anymore. It really hasn't since the very, very, very beginning of Classic. But I don't know, I thought that would be very cool. Anyway, so here's one of the mob types that I was really interested in discussing. This mob is burrowed under the ground, and it's coming out of a black corruption disc-looking area, and it cannot be moved. So if you do not pull properly in some of these areas, you are going to be really, really hindered in terms of your movement. And that mob isn't, it doesn't look too easy to me. I mean, it's dying quickly and normal, but it looks like it's got some weight to it, some mechanics and perhaps health pool that might stop you for a bit. So you're going to have to pull mobs to it if you want to cleave it down. And that's kind of the death of Mythic Plus, if you ask me. A lot of, you know, you're going to see that a lot in this expansion. A lot of mobs that are going to slow you down, and they're going to make the dungeon a slower pace than if you wanted to go like full, you know, like say if you were 140, what this dungeon would look like, you know. You can't really just go right to bosses and stuff like that in some of these Mythic Pluses, and this one is no exception. There's also these mobs here, these skeletons that have bone shield. I can steal it. If you're a Death Knight, you can steal it, or if you're a Blood Elf, oh boy, yeah, that's a great change. Anyway, so yeah, this area is quite cool, and we're going to be fighting a new boss coming up here shortly. It's a very interesting encounter. I'm going to talk a little bit about it when we get there, but otherwise we just have, like, again here, another one of these. So I'm saying, all right, let's go. We're gonna have to pull those mobs to this because simply can't afford to pull one at a time here, you know. And you're gonna see this throughout the dungeon. There's gonna be a couple mobs that kind of surround the areas where these worms come out, but they don't necessarily pat directly over it. So really immediately makes me gives me a nod towards how good Blood Death Knight is. Of course, with grips, it allows a much bigger, better positioning. So now we're fighting this mob, and again, I learned nothing about it, but I do recognize that those mushrooms are dealing damage to me. So I said, hey, you know what? Let's move out of the mushrooms. Very good idea, of course, Metro. Hey there, guys. It's a good idea. Okay, we've moved him out of the playable area, and the boss has now reset. So then I take a quick look at the dungeon journal, which probably should have done before I started the dungeon, but of course can't. There's no time for that. It's 2:30 in the morning. Let's go look at the dungeon, and it says make sure he hits the mushrooms with shockwave. That's it. That's all I've learned. I don't know why. I don't know why you would do it, but I guess that's what you're supposed to do. You can't take him out of this little area here. It's actually quite a small area. Actually, now that I think about it, all the bosses, well, the second one not necessarily, but yeah, the first and the third boss especially were fought in a very small area. So that's something that I definitely don't like. And you know, since I've already compared this first boss to Medivh, I actually think that room is pretty similar too, in the fact that you're really limited in the space you have. But I know this isn't that big of a deal. I'm just facing him at the mushrooms, and it's getting rid of them. But again, I don't know why it would get rid of them. I mean, nobody ever has to move on the encounter, and even that mechanic there, it looked like it was gonna like maybe pick the warrior up and kind of like throw him. I think that would make a lot more sense, because maybe you'd run into the mushrooms or do something that would be dangerous in some way, other than just standing here and doing damage. But one way or the other, I feel accomplished because I made him kill his own mushrooms. So that's normal dungeons in a nutshell. And I don't know. I just don't know. I think that's, you know, really the subject of this conversation today. It's just I don't know what to think about this. It's I know it's the alpha, whatever. Perhaps it's us that's doing too much damage. I don't know how to feel about that, but I don't feel like we're the appropriate level for this. Like it feels like we're doing dungeons that we already outgear, but we're scaled down to the item level that would be so absurdly low that no human being who has played Legion would ever have it. So yeah, a bit worrying, frankly. But we'll not focus on that too much. Anyway, the bone shield, again, going to slow you down considerably. You're going to have to really get rid of those quickly. Luckily, you'll have plenty of Blood Elves who have not wanted to pay money to race change. But yeah, you'll have plenty of AoE interrupts, and of course, AoE dispels, and that's going to be pretty needed on this pack, because all of these mobs that come with that pack is going to put a pretty big absorb on them. So Death Knight, another good target for this. Just kind of spell steal the bone shield off, and you're laughing, bro. But anyway, there's a pretty important lore figure there. A bit disjointed, the lore, because I haven't done this in a while, but this zone is really cool. Nazma itself, I think it's a really unique zone. I think this dungeon is quite unique, honestly. And I think all the bosses are quite unique, too, in the fact that they're, they contain a lot of interesting mechanics. This last boss especially. But the dungeon itself, so here you're going to see, so it's kind of got this, I took Inky Black Potion off. It's kind of got this like white fog to it. And you know, it really reminds me of the Ashes of Ariandel expansion for Dark Souls 3. If you guys ever played Dark Souls 3, played the expansion, you go in the painted world of whatever that is, Ariandel, and it's kind of just, it looks like it's really snowy, you know what I mean? And that's really the feel I get here. But anyway, you're going to have more of these worm guys here. Another big behemoth guy. Looks like a brother of an old god or something like that. And they're just going to, they're going to pat. Those big guys are going to patrol. And then the worms are not obviously going to be able to move. So you're just going to want to try to get mobs on top of these worms. And again, you know, these mobs are so inadequate that we could have easily, you know, now first of all, we should skip that mob. But this warrior is like, I'm a slave no longer. So he goes over there. But anyway, we definitely could have skipped a lot here. And you could definitely pull a lot bigger. Like, realistically, if we were serious about this on this difficulty, we would just mount it up and ran to the end because these mobs are trivial. But we wouldn't have been able to do that because we would have been stuck in combat with those worms. And presumably that would have been a bad thing, but maybe not. Very interesting ending to this dungeon. We'll talk about that very shortly, but otherwise I think this dungeon is pretty cool. And I do feel like it's relatively short. I mean, it does have 4 bosses. I'm interested in seeing the timers for some of these dungeons, actually. Really, the real discussion that I'm really the most interested in is seeing the trash count and the timers for Mythic Plus in this expansion. So I have a feeling it's going to really shake things up. Based on how this dungeon is gone, really the 2 new dungeons that we did this week, I think they're really going to show us something about what Mythic Plus is going to be like. But anyway, we jump down into what looks like a Titan, I don't know, like a machine or a construct of some sort, and somebody's already aggroed the boss. And I don't really know what's going on here because the boss has a debuff or buff or whatever you consider it on him, that he's converting any damage we do into blood energy. Now, the only thing I could think of, and I do believe this is the case, is when his blood energy gets so high, he summons an ad. Right there, he's going to begin summoning an ad. Now, this guy is casting, the Titan guy is casting a shield on the person. The only thing I could think of is the shield is meant to clear the poison. But look at the Titan guy is actually going over and attacking the ad. So I guess that's cool. I don't know. It's a nice little flavor, but it's kind of strange that the NPC is helping us do the encounter. But so, once again, I think the point here is he summons these blobs, and then you kill them. They're not really blobs, but creatures. He summons these things, and then you kill them, and they deal damage to him. That's the only thing I can think, but I don't know. You'll see it at the very end. Now, one thing that is happening here that's noteworthy is we have a stacking dot on us, and I don't know where it's coming from. Of course, like I said, I probably could have looked in the dungeon journal, but yeah, that really is testament to just how little there is going on in normal. So yeah, I believe it's probably just part of the encounter. You just take damage over time, but I don't imagine we're supposed to get as many stacks as we are. By the end, we have almost 20, and that's stressing things out a bit. So either we're doing something wrong, which I very much expect, or we are not doing the fight quick enough, or something like that. But regardless, you can AMS it. I probably could have dropped stacks if I. So I was trying to drop stacks like necrotic, basically. If I just got, whatever 6 seconds left, I could have dropped it with AMS. That would have been useful, but at this point, it doesn't really matter. Boss is very low, and I'm thinking, we could probably kill the boss. Maybe just burn through whatever this is, but that's not going to work because he's not taking damage. So we have to kill these ads. Gonna grip the one in. One is very low, and as you're gonna see, it eventually dies, and the boss dies from it, I believe. So let's take a look. Yes. So as the one on the left died, the boss died. So anyway, I don't know. Interesting dungeon. Like I said, normal is really not very insightful, but hopefully this will be a useful look. I'm excited to hear you guys' thoughts on the dungeon. I quite like the aesthetics. I really actually love the aesthetics, so that's very cool. A little concerned about the trash, again, because there's so much extra of it, and it slows the pacing down. But anyway, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys in the next one.